I'm just going to show you, I'm going to be clear with you, using the barbell approach to investing for retirement, that inflation is the enemy. No other way around that. This is bad, man. Thankfully, we don't have that today. We haven't had it for quite some time, and presumably we're not going to have it for quite some time to come. But I mean, the 70s and the early part of the 80s were just horrific. Inflation just doomed people. And it's sad because a lot of these portfolios that we're using as models are built on this episode of history that we just haven't seen very often throughout historical. I mean, I get it. We got Zimbabwe. I got my Zimbabwean $1,000 bill back there someplace. That's not it. Anyway, we got Zimbabwe. We got Venezuela. Obviously, Germany. But it just doesn't happen that much. In fact, right now what's happening is that developed countries are dealing with the absolute opposite of that. Japan, from 1990 essentially till today, they're doing anything they can to inflate their currency because they're at deflation, and that has a whole different aspect for sure. But when you look at like the deflationary part of the Great Depression versus the inflationary part of the 70s, I tell you, man, it's worse in the inflationary era. It just is. And the reason because your bonds did not make money relative to just the rate of inflation and the 10-year treasury. Your bonds broke even with the rate of inflation. But you had to pay tax on that inflationary gains that you made. So you were behind in bonds. Your stocks did not make money, and yet they still pay the dividend. That I don't think certainly wasn't taxed as qualified dividends as it is today. So you still had to pay tax on that. So in fact, and the stock market in of itself did nothing. It did nothing. And we hear stocks are a hedge against inflation. Just, man, it's the same thing with gold as a hedge against inflation. There is no correlation that you can say is causation. It just doesn't work like that. But inflation, I'm just going to show you, it's nuts how bad it was. So you had stocks and bonds and obviously cash just get hammered, pummeled by everything, by inflation. And taxes, tax inflation, taxes inflation. Inflation is a tax on the middle class and the lower classes for sure. It's just horrific. And actually, economics will who actually teach the actual subject, the soft science, the social science of economics, they know this. Inflation is the biggest tax on the middle class because they don't see it. But when I show you this, it's nuts, man. So are we dealing with that today? No, certainly not. Well, the inflation of healthcare, all right, man, that's nothing compared to what we're going to see here. Nothing. How about inflation and education? Yeah, but I mean that's silly. Those days are gone. I'm just telling you right now. There's no way 20 years from now the educational establishment we know it today is going to exist. It's just not. It inherently can't keep doing what it's doing. Food, no, we got lots of good opportunities to. We've increased our food. We've increased our ability to produce food. Food is not inflationary. We find gas and oil, coal. Electricity and energy, there's not huge inflation there. There's one other one I'm thinking about. Housing is a big one, and that's just because government policies eliminating the houses. Look at Portland, Oregon, my goodness. So government policies are eliminating housing construction or forcing mandates on their solar panels in California that people can't afford. So that's not inflationary. It's fake. But I mean, so we're not dealing with this now. Thankfully, because it's bad. So, all right, let's see what this looks like because it's tough, man. I just, if you retire, and I'm the opposite of cherry picking here. I mean, again, the idea that this is somehow, I don't know, I was accused of cherry picking. I don't get it. But anyway, so here we're going to start in 1973 and 1974. So we're starting in 1973 when the market was down 16 or 15% and 27%. But it wasn't just a stock market. I'm telling you, man, if you started in the Great Depression, you would have been better off if you did the barbell approach because your money was worth more 5 years hence than your stocks. Even though your stocks got decimated, your actual cash money was worth more for sure. Here, though, both things are getting killed. I mean, I'm just telling you, look, the inflation, 6.2, 11, 9.1. The average yields weren't even coming near that. And on top of that, you got to pay tax on the average yields. Stocks, 14. I mean, I showed you this the other day. We closed at 97.55. 6 years later, we're at 96.11. I mean, it's crazy, man. And we started in 1973 at like 10. I think it was 116. And then 1981, we closed at 122. We made no money. Oh, it's bad. Anyway, so let's go into it. So we start in the cash play. We got $125,000 in cash. and we got 375,000 in stock. So you think in this scenario, because we have a significant amount of money in cash, we're able to avoid some of this devastation. And the answer to that normally would be yeah, except the inflation ate us alive, even on this side. I mean, that's the thing, because our inflation needs, our income needs are growing at such a high clip that even though we have a significant amount of money in cash, in the cash plate side of the barbell, it was getting just demolished by the cost of living increasing. And that did not happen in the Great Depression. I mean, that's the thing with the Depression, things cost less and less and less. So what happened was 25,000 would cost 23,000. 23,000 cost 21,000. So even though we weren't making a whole lot of money, the fact was, relative to the cost of living, it stayed solvent for sure. Now, on the stock market, we got hammered, but I mean, I'm telling you, man, if I had one of two things, which is high inflation, low stock returns, or deflation and low stock returns, I'm taking deflation, low stock returns 100% of the time. Because if you're in stocks, then you're screwed, no other way around that. But if you're in the barbell approach for deflation, at least the cash part of your stuff is actually growing in value while your stocks are getting killed. Here, the cash part of it is getting eaten alive by inflation, and the stock part of it is getting hammered by negative returns as well. In fact, I don't know if I want to do this, but one of these days maybe I'll do it. I'll say, look, what happens if we had cash in the Great Depression in stocks, and then we said, so we have negative stock, huge, horrible stock returns, but positive cash returns. Here we got horrible stock and horrible cash returns because inflation. When I say horrible cash returns, I mean inflation is eating away at our cash as we sit there. And then we can do high stock returns high stock returns and high inflation. Would that be what we'd do? I'm not sure when the time that was. Late 40s maybe, after the war. Anyway, all right, so watch. We got 125. We're taking 25,000 a year out initially. 375 in the cash, in the stock plate. All right, we're only taking 5% of cash a year, and I'm already reducing our spending by 10%. I'm even skipping the point where we're not reducing our spending. I'm just saying let's go straight into it because it's not going to be good. All right, so we get 25,000, 26,000, 29,000 because inflation is so bad. Again, we're starting 1973. 32,000, 34,000 is what our cash needs. So we need 5 years of 34,000 times 5 years. So we have roughly 170,000 that we got to take from the portfolio. But the portfolio, unfortunately, has grown from 375. It fell all the way to 235. It did grow back to 399, which is good. But in 399, it fell another 7% in 1977, and we had to take a distribution of 172. So we're left with 198,000. But watch, our income needs are going up. We need 38,000 now. Now it's almost, we only needed 25,000 just 6 years before. In 1979, we need 43,000. 1980, we need 49,000, almost doubled. So that rate of inflation is 7.2. 1981, we need 54,000, and finally, I have that 1 year where we're taking the decline that we need. So in 1982, we need to start the year of 1982. 54,000 times 5 is what we need. So we need roughly 266,000. But our portfolio did actually okay. We're at 315, and it grew 21% that year. So 315 times 21% minus that 266,000 we needed, we still had 116,000 left. Again, that just, we're running out of money. But we did survive the initial part of the horrific, 8-9 year period from 1973 until 1981. The problem is we just don't have enough in the portfolio to really capture the booming what's going on for the next basically 20 years. And here's the even worse problem. Even though our spending has declined from 54,000 to 51, the inflation that we're dealing with 13, 11, that's the yield, excuse me. Inflation that we're dealing with 6, we had 6, 3, 4, 3. And it's actually slowed down quite a bit, but it was so horrific before that it's not. We're just suffering the consequence of that horrific inflation from the late 70s, early 80s. So we have 51,000, 53, 55, and again, the inflation's actually calmed down a little bit. 3.6 and 1986 is only 1.9, which is pretty good. But then we still need 58,992 times 5. So we still need whatever that is. That's almost $300,000. We come over here, we only have $238,000 in the portfolio. So we still need a significant amount of money from the portfolio. And after we do that, we're left with $67,000, and then ultimately, we just run out of money, and we run out of money here in 1992. So we were able to survive from 1973 to 1992. And if I take my trusty calculator, 1992 minus 1973, that's 19 years. That's only a 5% a year distribution with a 10% decline in spending in year 10. I mean, that's even if I had another 10% decline in spending in year 20, it wouldn't matter because we got no money. So that's bad. So you retirees who retired right then, man, obviously most of them are well gone now, but man, God bless you, because that's trying times, man. That was trying times for sure. What is I don't have a strategy to how to deal with that. Yes, gold. We could have had gold in there for sure. I mean, absolutely. When did gold become legal again to own bullion? Let me look that up. I can't remember. Let me see. Hold on a second. I mean, this is nuts. Was gold illegal? Remember, FDR made it illegal to own gold. You could not own it in the United States. You had to turn it in. Was gold illegal to own at one time? Yes. In this country, the U.S., it was illegal for U.S. citizens to own gold in the form of gold bullion without a special license. On January 1st, 1975, these restrictions were lifted and gold can now be freely held in the U.S. without licensing or restrictions. Is there any reason why the price of gold went up? Because it was lifted from restriction. I'm actually reading a book by the guy who wrote Shogun, James Clavell, something like that. It's a freaking awesome book. Talking about the illegality, other than, I forgot what the country, Macau or something like that, of importing and exporting, of actually any citizens actually owning gold in Hong Kong and all these various countries throughout the world back, and this is in the 60s. And it's just the idea that you as a private individual in the US of A could not own gold is just freaking nuts, man. December 31st, 1974 ended the era of private U.S. gold restrictions, which had begun in 1933. As of January, U.S. citizens are free again to hold gold in any form, including bullion in any amount they can afford without reason. Man, the idea that the federal government would tell you how much you could own, it just is nuts. So anyway, so going back to the issue here, some guy was posting online that the price of gold went from 800, or was it? I can't remember what it was. From 1973 to whatever it was in 1981, was it 900? Yeah. I get that, but again, false restrictions from the government on your ability to own gold, and thus inherently the demand just jumped through the roof the minute they lifted those restrictions. What does demand do to prices? It makes prices increase. I don't know. I'll have to do another episode on why you need to own gold, because this is nuts, man. Now, look. At the end of the day, Nixon said we're all Keynesians now, and just the fools in D.C. Richard Nixon did wonderful at going against Alger Hiss and prosecuting him. Just a foolish economic policy. And it's just it's just, you look historically, all the suffering that did not have to, all this didn't have to happen. If just people pull their head out of their butts and say, we're going to restrict the private ownership of gold. We're going to import and mandate wage and price controls. Richard Nixon did this stuff, my friends. It wasn't some crazy radical, what's his name, McGovern. It was Richard Nixon. I mean, gold was illegal back before then. I mean, but it's still, at the end of the day, this is supposedly a rabid Republican. My goodness, man. And look what happened. You had nowhere to run legally in here. What are you going to do? Stocks, bonds, your bank? Inflation was killing you, was eating your asset base under your very skin, and you had no clue. Now we have better, smarter intelligence, theoretically. Man, I don't know that to be true. I don't know it to be true. But all I know is, man, at the end of the day, hopefully this is the exception, not the rule, but we see lots of politicians out there, free Medicare for all, free this college. It's nuts. Anyway, so scary stuff. The best thing to do is obviously, now if high inflation means, you'd love to have debt. Inflation, got a fixed rate mortgage, inflation going through the roof. Debt's a wonderful thing to have. I don't want to encourage you to have debt. I just want to encourage you to watch out for inflation. That is the bugaboo. If we can stay low inflation, and I actually think we're gonna. I think the economy is set up such inflation is not an issue for many, many years to come. And the reason for that is just because we're getting older. No other way around that. There's not as much population growth. There's not as much of various things that keep inflation rising, the stupidity of the monetary policy and things. Yeah, I get, helicopter ban, quantitative easing and whatnot, but I'm not that worried about inflation. But that is the bugaboo in the house for sure. So stay tuned, man. Stay tuned and guard that back door. And I'd say go buy gold because it was illegal for a long time in the U.S. and you had no place to hide if you were trying to avoid the dastardliness of inflation. Stocks didn't do it and bonds didn't do it. All right, we'll see you next time.